Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Before we get into our second segment of the day here on the show, I do want to remind you yet again about the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features you can use here on YouTube to contribute and interact with the show while we are live streaming. You can do two or even three things if you do not prefer YouTube as your base of support. You can contribute through the GSMCpodcast.net website and leave a tip or donation there. Or you can click that $ in the chat box by the comments section, leave a tip or donation through that way. Or you can make yourself available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features. Leave a comment, question, or concern you have throughout the show in the comments section that I will be able to read out loud. Just makes the show that much better. But without further ado, let's jump into our second segment of the day, sticking in the world of Thursday Night Football, talking about some player props that really intrigue me in this game. And I think this game is very stylistic in terms of how each offense is defined by certain players. We have the Washington Commanders, who rely on Jaden Daniels in the system in his first year to run it efficiently as possible, and most importantly, make him comfortable and make his best traits really pop. On the Eagles side of things, it's kind of a laissez-faire approach where they kind of leave the players be and let them play the way they know how and see what comes of more improvisational skill rather than kind of game script and game flow determining what they do. So it's kind of an easier way to analyze these props from that sense, but it's still a very exciting game in terms of it being an NFC East battle, in terms of what it means for both of these teams. So either way, it's going to be very interesting to see how bettors bet on this game and what I'm about to tell you. Starting off with Jaden Daniels, because he has been someone who it's been pretty easy to analyze from every metric outside of prop betting, just because he's not necessarily meant to be a bettor's favorite quarterback week in, week out. We've seen him, I believe, hit the under on most of his games, and people kind of get mad at that and kind of get skeptical and frustrated of what that means for him as a betting quarterback. But I can see why, he still is attractive to bet on, because he's just so easy to analyze outside of betting and so easily to analyze once he is taken into account inside of the betting perspective. However, I'm going to kind of take a risk here and say he's going to hit the over in terms of passing yards at 224.5 minus 117. It will be kind of easy and the safest bet to take the under here. But I think what we learned from Jaden Daniels is not necessarily to trust metrics, right? It's more so to trust his efficiency and his knowledge of his offense. Because once someone gets into games of this magnitude and they're a rookie quarterback and they've seen how their system works out, they're going to be more confident and thus more ambitious. And we've seen it a little bit with Drake May. We've kind of seen it with Caleb Williams, but he has kind of regressed a little bit. But Jaden Daniels has been the most effective of them all. And so whether or not he hits the over or under, just his knowledge, his maturity in his rookie season separates him from others in terms of riskiness on the betting market. Because while a lot of bettors probably have played it safe with him all year long, this is the game to get a little bit risky. Because you should know that Jaden Daniels is more likely to hit the under, but you should also take into account where he is this season and where this Washington Commanders team is right now in their situation. So that's why I feel like I can tell you that this can be a very ambitious bet that could hit for you just because of what the Washington Commanders can do. and what they've done all year and how they've gotten to this point. On the other side of things, Jalen Hurts is someone who you can bet on in many different manners. You don't necessarily have to look at his passing yards. You don't necessarily have to look at him for his passing touchdowns. You can look at him from a myriad number of ways. And that is why I'm going to say, in terms of rush yards, he's going to hit the over, and he's perhaps more likely to do that than Jaden Daniels. Because while Jaden Daniels kind of runs are more designed, scripted, and come with the flow of the game, Jalen Hurts is definitely more on the improvisational, out of structure side. Because of that, I feel like Jalen Hurts will have more opportunities to run with the football, create plays with his legs, both in the passing game and in the running game, just because of that carefree ability. I don't necessarily think Jaden Daniels is at that level yet. He might get to that level in the future if they start trusting him a little bit more in terms of decision-making outside of structure. But Jalen Hurts is someone who, at this point, we know what his propensities are in terms of the running game. And minus 117, that's a pretty safe bet out of both of these quarterbacks because we know the stylistic differences we're going to see between these two quarterbacks. How one performs within the structure of an offense and how one performs without any structure at all. And so Jalen Hurts is going to, in my humble opinion, be very attractive on the betting market from a rushing perspective. Now let's get into some more skill position players here. Starting off with one who I feel like will make his voice heard in this game, but not necessarily in the biggest of ways. He's not going to have a 8 to 10 catch game for 200 or so yards. He's going to have moments where he shines, and that's what I feel he is. He is a very solid wide receiver one for Philly, but he's not necessarily someone who relies on racking up yardage in the games of this magnitude. And that's why I think A.J. Brown, in terms of target share and things of that nature, isn't necessarily appealing, so he's going to hit the under for me tomorrow night at 5.5 receptions and minus 146. And it's not an indictment of his skill, his ability as a receiver. It's just kind of a microcosm of what he brings to the table for Philly because he's more of a vertical threat than most wide receiver ones. And from that perspective, I feel like Jalen Hurts is going to want to use him if he can see different flaws in the Commanders' secondary. And there definitely are going to be those moments because, like I said, I think the Commanders' secondary is one that is improving, but it's not quite there yet. So look for Jalen Hurts to want to exploit that, but not often because there are still going to be some things off the cuff with this Philly offense. A lot of things to do with Saquon. A lot of things potentially to get Dallas Goedert more involved. A lot of things to do with Devontae Smith as well because I think he's the better pure route runner of the two. So I don't necessarily think A.J. Brown will affect this game all the time, but it'll affect this game when it matters in the moments where the Commanders least expect it. So that's why I feel like hitting the under in terms of receptions is a safe bet for A.J. Brown in this game. And the last two, Dallas Goedert, this one's a little bit of an interesting one. Scoring a touchdown at any time in the game at plus 300. I feel like Dallas Goedert is getting to that level where this Philly offense kind of needs him, and he's going to step up in a big way in red zone efficiency, in terms of exploiting zone coverage, and he's just a physical tight end who's been an unsung hero at the tight end position for Philly all year long. And I feel like, Philly are going to have their opportunities. But I think where they'll kind of suffer a little bit is in the red zone, just because Jalen Hurts gets a little bit more indecisive when he doesn't have as much open field to work with, right? We know that when they get down to a certain yard line, the tush push is always in play. But when it's kind of like 20 to 25 yards out, then it's kind of, weirdly enough, not necessarily a point of strength for Philly, in my opinion, because Jalen Hurts feels too compacted or congested a little bit in the red zone, and thus his big play abilities might get threatened through there. So look for Dallas Goedert to kind of alleviate that burden on Jalen Hurts because of his abilities to exploit soft coverages and his strength in the red zone. So I think he can score a touchdown in this game, most definitely. And I like the value, even though it's kind of a lofty money line for him there. And last but not least, let's talk about Terry McLaurin. And this is a funny bet here because, like I said, the Eagles' defense is certainly one that Terry McLaurin feels he can do well against, but I'm going to say he hits the under here at 59.5 receiving yards, a minus 114. That's certainly an ambitious long shot bet considering how solid and stellar Terry McLaurin has been this season. When I think about what the Eagles' secondary can do, I feel like through the melding of youth and experience, they developed a way where young guys like Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean can play more freely and can play in a more versatile system, whereas the older guys like Darius Slay, and not necessarily old in terms of age, but old in terms of experience with the Eagles and Reed Blankenship, can get less exposed in certain moments. And so I like what they're doing to A, integrate these young players into their secondary, and B, kind of utilize the older guys as the experienced leaders rather than, have them get exposed in coverage in certain moments. And so Terry McLaurin's going to find this to be a tougher test than he initially thinks, because I've loved how Quinyon Mitchell has developed. I love how physical Cooper DeJean has been for this defense. And most importantly, when you have mentors such as Slay and Blankenship, you're going to steadily mature week in, week out. And in a big game like this, look for them to be primed and ready to go, coming out guns a-blazing in this one, and for Terry McLaurin to potentially be stymied for quite some time in this one. Let me know what you think in the comments below. It's going to be an interesting game, especially how you analyze these teams from a betting perspective. But when we come back after the break, we transition to the conclusion of our positional ranking, starting off with the tight end position. Very interesting position, very volatile position as always, so you don't want to miss it when we come right back after this short break.
Looking for your daily fix?